At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. And what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's get into today's story. High Admiral Terrian Sola stood on the Iron Hold's command deck, a vessel whose name was a monument to irony. His matte black exoskeleton drank the ambient light, his posture the only outward sign of the conflict within him. Before him, the main holographic display rendered the void with merciless clarity, a theater of silent destruction where the Gress performed their final act. Their fleet structure defied Skriss definition, an inexorable wave of living metal ships that moved with the coordinated, self-sacrificial logic of a replicating weapon. They swarmed, enveloped, and devoured. Their latest conquest was the Steadfast. Solo watched his flagship's sister vessel die, a ship he had commissioned with a captain he called by first designation. The Steadfast adhered to the doctrine of symmetrical warfare, the foundation of Skriss naval strategy. It held its position in the geometric pattern of protocol. It calculated firing solutions, its shields cycling in a mathematically perfect sequence. Beautiful, elegant, a gravestone. The Gress fighters, jagged things of biometal and plasma, bypassed the doctrine. They bypassed formal duels. They crashed against the Steadfast shields in self-immolating waves. Each impact a brief flare, their dying energy creating vulnerabilities for the wave that followed. They were an intelligent avalanche, and the Steadfast a monument of ice in its path.
Shield at 12%.
Captain Tyra Gent reported from his side, her voice a steady frequency. Her own polished exoskeleton reflected flashes from the dying ship.
Hull breaches on decks 9 through 16. Life support is failing.
Sola remained silent. On the tactical overlay, the Steadfast calm blue signature flickered, shifting to yellow, then a blaring crimson. Catastrophic failure. The deck plate shuddered with the seismic shock of a capital ship tearing itself apart. The doctrine assumed any enemy that fought with reason, with self-preservation. The Gress desired only victory and saw their ships and lives as ammunition to achieve it. A final blinding flash of white washed out the display. When the light faded, the Steadfast had vanished. A new nebula of incandescent gas and shattered metal glowed in its place. 19 minutes had erased a third of his fleet, the anchor of his port flank. The brutal arithmetic of annihilation had solved the beautiful mathematics of Skriss warfare. "Report," Sola said, his voice flat. Gent's vocalizers clicked.
The Gress swarm is consolidating. They are holding position, blocking the lane to Silene.
They know they've won. They're savoring it. Only the low hum of life support broke the silence as his officers processed the loss. Every one of them was a follower of the doctrine. They had all watched the Steadfast die by the book, and they struggled to comprehend it. They were looking for an error in the equation. The equation itself was wrong. "Helm, bring us about," Sola commanded. "Maintain a defensive posture at maximum engagement range. Comms, fleet-wide damage report. Tight beam only." He turned from the holographic void, the Steadfast afterimage ghosting his vision. The weight of millions of lives on the planet below pressed down on him. A world now shielded only by his broken fleet and a doctrine that had just proven itself a eulogy. His family was down there, his mate, his spawn. They were in the capital city, assuming the doctrine was mathematically sound. The truth of that assumption felt like a physical sickness. The intelligence drone was a pinnacle of Skriss engineering, a sliver of metal designed to observe undetected. Its final transmission was a shriek. The signal penetrated Gress jamming for a scant 8 seconds, but it was enough. On the main display in the Admiral's ready room, the drone's last sight replayed. Fragmented footage showed the rust-colored plains outside Silene's capital, place Sola had picnicked with his family. Now, scars marred the plains, crawling with Gress ground forces. A legion of biomechanical constructs, their angular carapaces of fused metal and polymer reflecting the weak light. They were assembling something. Colossal structures rose from the earth like metallic growths, ribs of unknown alloys fused with pulsing organic membranes. At the heart of each, they hoisted a focusing lens the size of a municipal transport. Plasma cannons, Gent stated, her voice flat. She stood beside Sola, her posture rigid. The energy signatures and assembly rate indicate planetary bombardment weapons. They will bathe the cities in plasma until the bedrock glows. Sola stared at the image, at the grass swarming over the weapons. Time, he said. Gent traced the patterns over a console. The primary shield generator remains operational, but it is a static defense. The cannons will bypass its optimal deflection angles. She paused, verifying the calculations. They will be operational in 68 hours. 68 hours. The Galactic Concorde's relief force was 3 weeks away. His fleet was shattered, outnumbered 5-1. The Doctrine offered only one solution. A final, glorious charge that would doom everyone. He would die honorably, and so would everyone on Silene. All authorized options lead to certain defeat, Gent continued, her tone softening. Our mandate is to hold the line. The Doctrine dictates we meet the enemy fleet in open engagement. The enemy fleet is waiting for us to do just that, Sola said. They will bleed us dry in the void, and their cannons will finish the job. The Doctrine assumes a sane opponent. The Gress are rational, Admiral, Gent corrected. They are merely absolute. Their doctrine is victory. Ours is honor. And when honor leads to extinction, Sola countered, turning to face her. What is it worth? Gent stood silent. Her entire life rested upon that question having a self-evident response. Honor was the star by which the Skris navigated the universe. To question it was to unmoor her existence. She stood her ground, awaiting honorable, unwinnable orders. Sola left her. He walked through the quiet corridors of his flagship. Crew members stiffened to attention as he passed. They trusted him. They trusted the Doctrine he represented. They were all marching in lockstep toward an abyss, and he alone saw the edge. In the austere quiet of his private chambers, he stood before a slab of polished volcanic glass that reflected a distorted, lightless version of himself. He took a slow breath. Voice command, he said, his tone low. Authorization Sola. Tarian. High Admiral. 934 Alpha. A soft tone acknowledged him. Access Xenostrategic Archives. Classification. Prohibited Doctrine H1. The system paused. A faint red light glowed. Warning. Accessing this archive is a Level 1 violation of Concord Armistice Treaty 38 Gamma. The system will log this access. Acknowledged. Sola's muscles bunched. Acknowledged. Warning. Skris High Command has deemed the contents of this archive psychologically hazardous. Proceed. Proceed. The volcanic glass shimmered and became a screen. A single stark designation appeared. Terran. He navigated the files with a wave of his hand. The archive was a forbidden collection from a species the galaxy had collectively decided was too dangerous to emulate. The Galactic Concorde had banned their tactics, their strategies, their entire philosophy of war, deeming it barbaric and dishonorable. The Concorde forced them into peace, their martial history sealed away like a biohazard. The Skris had copied the archives first, of course, for study, to understand a predator's mind. Sola scrolled past concepts that sent a crawling sensation through him. Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Machiavelli, alien names, but the ideas were aberrant. Deception, subterfuge, total war. Tactical maps showed forgotten earthbound conflicts scarred by battle lines drawn in blood. He opened a file titled 20th Century Naval Doctrine. The file showed ancient sea levels, iron behemoths that floated on water. Grainy footage displayed aircraft carriers launching swarms of fighter craft in swirling engagements resembling riots. He found a subsection, Scorched Earth Policies. He read accounts of armies burning their own lands, poisoning their own wells, leaving only devastation for an advancing enemy. Self-destructive, irrational, and effective. He delved deeper, his revulsion sharpening into a cold focus. He found accounts of guerrilla warfare, of smaller forces using terrain to bleed a larger enemy. He read about feigned retreats, ambushes, Trojan horses, decapitation strikes. Here, only a vicious, intelligent pragmatism remained, aimed at a single goal: survival. For hours, he stood, the flickering holograms of humanity's bloody past casting light on his face. Another tenet of his own conviction fractured with every file he opened. The humans fought for victory. Honor was a casualty they readily accept. The 68-hour clock was a constant presence in his mind. Honor offered his family only death. He looked at a map of a battle whose name his vocalizers struggled to form: Stalingrad, and saw a city of rubble, a war won through a stubborn, ugly refusal to die. He found what he was looking for in a file on a Russian general named Kutuzov, a man who had surrendered his nation's capital, lured his enemy deep into hostile territory, and let winter and starvation accomplish what his armies could not. The ultimate act of cowardice, and the ultimate act of genius. Sola closed the archive. The volcanic glass wall returned, showing only his dark reflection.
Repeat that order, Admiral.
Captain Gent's voice was sharp. They stood on the Ironholds Bridge, the holographic battlespace a web of friendly blue vectors and hostile red markers. You heard me, Captain, Sola said, his back to her. Order the fleet to disengage, a full-scale, uncontrolled retreat. I want them to break formation, vent plasma from secondary systems to simulate damage, and run. A stillness fell over the bridge crew. Officers froze at their stations, their discipline in conflict with the profanity of his command. An uncontrolled rout was a disgrace, an act so contrary to their nature they struggled to process it.
Admiral,
Gent said, stepping closer, her voice a low hiss.
To break formation under fire is to guarantee our destruction. The doctrine is clear. We would be presenting our weakest aspects to the enemy. They will dismantle us.
That is exactly what I want them to think, Sola replied, turning to face her. A new cold calculation was in his gaze. The Gress are predators. They have tested our strength. Now, we will show them our weakness. We will appeal to their arrogance. He gestured to the display. We seeded the Charon Belt with proximity mines 3 days ago, a standard defense. The Gress charted it and have avoided it. They believe we placed the mines to protect our flank. Using our own defensive grid as a trap is alien to their thinking. Gent's vocalizers parted.
You intend to flee through the Charon Belt?
No, Sola corrected. I intend for the Gress to pursue us into it. Helm, plot a course that skirts the field's edge, a course a panicked captain might take. He looked across the stunned bridge crew. Comms, broadcast on open channels. Panicked, chaotic crosstalk. I want the Gress to hear our fear. He was asking them to embody cowardice, to strip away the discipline that defined them. The order was a psychological violation. Gent stood frozen, her loyalty in conflict with 1,000 years of doctrine. This was a trick, a perversion of war, a dishonorable, ugly piece of theater. But the alternative was annihilation. The logic, cold and brutal, presented itself. She hated it, and hated him for revealing it. Acknowledge the order, Captain, Sola said, his voice flat and final. Tyra Gent drew herself to her full height.
Aye, Admiral.
She turned to the crew.
You heard the Admiral. Execute the Kutuzov gambit. All ships break formation. Run in a way your ancestors would have forbidden.
The bridge crew sprang into action. The Skriss's fleet's serene blue vectors wavered, then shattered. On the display, the Gress fleet paused, as if confused by the sudden collapse. Then, like predators sensing wounded prey, the red markers surged forward in greedy pursuit. Sola watched, his posture stiff. The ship lurched as it accelerated, the orchestrated chaos beginning. He was throwing away the wisdom of his civilization on a gamble borrowed from a species of chaotic primates. A cold, thrilling certainty settled in him. This dishonorable act would work. On the Ironhold's bridge, the crew worked in tense silence. On the holographic battle space, 3 Gress cruiser icons had vanished, their last positions marked by expanding debris clouds. The remaining Gress fleet, stunned and wary, had ceased their pursuit. The feigned retreat had worked. The Skriss fleet was regrouping. Real tallies of enemy losses replaced simulated damage reports. They had struck a blow, but it felt hollow. Captain Ghent approached the command dais, her steps heavy. She stopped before Sola, her face impassive. "My report, High Admiral," she began, her voice tight. "We confirmed the destruction of the Gress cruisers, Voracious Maw, Endless Hunger, and Gnawing Void. All losses were minimal. The maneuver was a success." She paused. "A tactical success," she clarified, her voice dropping. "But a strategic disgrace. We ran. We used deception. We lured them into a trap." "We destroyed their cruisers, Captain," Sola said calmly, keeping his back to her. "At what cost to ourselves?" Ghent pressed, her voice rising. "The surviving Gress have broadcast our retreat across the sector. They mock us. They call us cowards. How do I tell my crew to take pride in a victory won through shame? You have stained the honor of this fleet." "I have saved their lives," Sola countered, turning to face her, "and the lives of millions on the planet below. That is the honor that concerns me. The sagas can debate my methods after we have ensured someone remains to write them." "The sagas are the foundation of our culture," Ghent shot back. "They remind us of how we win is as important as winning. The doctrine is more than tactics, Admiral. To abandon it is to become something lesser." "Who we are," Sola said, his voice a dangerous whisper, "faces annihilation. The doctrine is a beautiful song, Ghent, but the Gress are deaf. They are a wildfire. A fire accepts no honorable duel. You seek shelter, you build breaks, and you use every clever, dishonorable tool you can find to survive its passing." He gestured to the display, to the saved ships, to the breathing room his gambit had purchased. 3 of their cruisers are destroyed. 68 hours has become 74. I have bought us time. If you find my stain on our honor unacceptable, you are free to request a transfer. He was her commanding officer, her idol, the man who had embodied the ideal she now watched him dismantle. The pain in his posture, the weight of his choice were palpable. Still, acceptance remained out of reach. With a sharp exhalation, Ghent snapped to attention. "No, Admiral. I will remain at my post." Her voice became rigid and formal. "I will follow your orders. But I follow them, though I do not comprehend them." She turned and marched from the dais. Sola watched her go. He had won the engagement and saved his ships, but in doing so, declared war on the soul of his own command. Later, at her console, Ghent reviewed the engagement logs. The anger was a cold mass in her gut. The logs showed the Gress cruisers blindly chasing their arrogance into oblivion. The maneuver was a stain on their honor, and yet a cold logic acknowledged its perfection. In the sterile confines of high-security Cell 7B, Major Kenna Rain tilted her head. The cell was a 6x3-meter box with a slab for a bed, a sanitary unit, and a small tactical repeater on the wall, a concession from the Skriss, who believed watching her own side lose would be its own punishment. For 2 weeks, she had watched the Gress dismantle the Skriss fleet's elegant, doomed geometry. She was a Skriss prisoner for 6 Terran months, captured during a minor border skirmish. She'd spent her time observing her captors, learning their rhythms, their rigid formality, their utter predictability. But what played out on the repeater was something else, messy, chaotic, and utterly human. She watched the playback again, tracking the Skrish ship's panic-scattered retreat. The venting plasma, the frantic comms chatter, it was all textbook. A classic feigned retreat, an anvil waiting for a hammer, a minefield waiting for an overconfident pursuer. When the icons for 3 Gress cruisers vanished, Kenna Rain let out a short, sharp laugh. "Well, I'm be damned," she murmured. "Kutuzov, straight out of 1812. Her knowledge of history was a deep intimacy with humanity's endless inventive capacity for violence. She'd seen this exact strategy play out countless times. Lure them in, overextend them, hit them when they're arrogant. It was a dirty trick, a coward's trick, and a brutally effective tool. And the Skriss had just used it. The Skriss, who considered deception a cultural poison. Something had broken, or rather, someone. This was a deliberate decision. It meant the Skriss commander, this High Admiral Sola, had reached a point of desperation so profound he was willing to throw his culture's rulebook into the nearest star. She leaned back against the cold wall, a slow, cynical smile forming. Her captors were facing a crisis of identity. For the first time since her capture, Kenna Rain felt a flicker of curiosity. The game had become interesting. Someone had introduced a new set of rules, her rules. And with the weary certainty of a historian, she knew the first lie is always the hardest. The rest get easier. "This is undignified," Gent stated, her voice a low protest. Sola stood watching the holographic battle space. Dozens of new false energy signatures now littered it, mimicking Skriss frigates and cruisers. They danced in chaotic patterns, a cacophony of ghosts designed to overwhelm Gress sensors. "Dignity is a luxury we have left behind, Captain," Sola replied, his voice rough with fatigue. "The Gress are systematic. They will hold their advance until they have a clear picture of our fleet. We will deny them that clarity." He had ordered his officers to perform another act of technological heresy, hijacking civilian broadcast relays. Satellites meant for entertainment now projected thousands of false warships, turning the entire Selenian sphere into a hall of mirrors. The tactic came from a human naval doctrine file labeled Electronic Warfare Countermeasures, mid-21st century, an ancient, brutish tactic that relied on overwhelming an opponent with noise. Felt crude. The weight of his crew's silent disapproval settled on him. They followed his orders professionally, but their movements were stiff, their silence a judgment. He was turning the art of war into a charlatan's trick. Sola turned from the holographic display. He stared down at the lower decks, at the disciplined officers carrying out a strategy that violated every instinct. He had asked them to betray their training, then their technology, systematically dismantling the Skriss way of war, piece by dishonorable piece. The cost of survival was everything he had ever held sacred. For 12 hours, the Gress fleet remained motionless. The ghost signals flickered and danced, and the Gress watched. Then, with cold deliberation, the Gress moved. A single small squadron broke from the main swarm. They moved with terrifying speed toward the first civilian broadcast relay's physical location and fired a single overwhelming volley. The relay and the thousands of ghost signals it generated vanished. Then the squadron moved to the next relay and the next. On the Ironhold's bridge, Sola watched, his jaw tight. The Gress commander was an intelligent predator. Having analyzed the illusion, he was now calmly, ruthlessly disassembling it. The last day's destruction left the battlespace silent and clear once more. It showed Sola's small, battered fleet, now starkly revealed, and the immense, waiting Gress swarm. Then, a system-wide broadcast overrode all channels. A series of harsh, scraping Gress sounds played before a crudely translated text appeared. Objective: Silene Defense Fleet. Analysis: Tactics shifted. Honor abandoned. Deception attempted. Conclusion: Prey has learned fear. Prey is unworthy of the hunt. New directive: Annihilation will now commence. Your cowardice has earned your world oblivion. The message ended. The bridge was still. The grass had seen through their deception and judged them for it. They had mocked their newfound cowardice. Sola had tried to play a predator's game, and the true predator had laughed. Ghent turned to him, her posture a silent, bitter rebuke. Sola ignored it. The grass were intelligent and adaptive, and he had now personally offended them. He had traded his honor for time, and the enemy had just escalated the stakes. He needed a new chapter in the Book of Chaos, and the library was open. The weight of tactical failure settled over the bridge. The officers worked in silence, their shock replaced by the grim reality of being outmaneuvered. In her cell, Kenna Rain felt a shift in the ship's energy. During a guard shift, she recognized an opportunity. The senior guard's posture was rigid with frustration. "Your Admiral's ghost did more than just fail," Kenna said calmly. "They were a roadmap." The guard stiffened. "Prisoner, be silent. You created a lot of noise," Kenna pressed. "The grass just listened for their quiet spots. The spaces between your broadcast relays. It told them exactly where your fleet truly was. An amateur's mistake." The guard froze. This was a specific, accurate tactical analysis. Protocol for battlefield critical intelligence, regardless of the source, was absolute. He keyed his calm. "Command, this is Guard Sergeant Varus. I have a situation with a human prisoner." Minutes later, Captain Ghent stood before Rain's cell. "Explain," she commanded. "You use a 21st century tactic against a 24th century opponent," Rain said, with the weary patience of a professor. "Electronic warfare is a scalpel. You used a sledgehammer. You showed them a board full of fakes, and in doing so, you outlined the only 3 places the real fleet could be. Your admiral is desperate, and desperation is making him predictable." Ghent stared at her. The prisoner, historian, had diagnosed their failure with more accuracy than her own intelligence officers. She turned and strode away. The summons came from the High Admiral himself. The bridge of a Skris warship was a temple of order. Kenna Rain, flanked by 2 guards, felt out of place in her drab prison jumpsuit. She ignored the stares and focused on High Admiral Sola. Sola dispensed with pleasantries. He gestured to the main holographic display, showing the stark reality of their situation. His small fleet, the Gress Swarm, and the vulnerable planet of Silene. "You're a historian," Sola stated. "You specialize in your species' history of violence. That archive is an open book of chaos." He turned to face her fully, the hologram's light casting shadows on his dark exoskeleton. His voice was low, filled with grim resolve. "Explain the next chapter." Kenna Rain stared at the holographic battlespace, her mind racing. A Skris High Admiral was asking her, a human prisoner, how to win his war. The irony was stark. "The Gress think like a wolf pack," she began, her voice crisp. "You've confirmed it twice. First, you acted like wounded prey, and they got greedy. They fell into your trap. Second, you tried to confuse them with numbers, like a herd scattering. But the pack leader calmly dismantled that illusion. They're a coordinated hunting party." She pointed at the display, at the mass of red Gress icons. "Fighting them head-on is a losing battle. Running is futile. Simple tricks have failed, so instead of attacking their hunters, you attack their supply chain." She shifted her finger, pointing to smaller icons trailing behind the main Gress fleet. Ghent stepped forward. "Those are their logistical ships, fuel tankers, supply vessels. To reach them, we would have to fight through their entire fleet." "No," Kenna corrected. "You go around." She looked at Sola. "What are your smallest, fastest ships?" "The Stiletto-class corvettes," Sola answered. "But their torpedoes have insufficient yield to breach a cruiser's shields." "You need penetration over explosive force," Kenna said. "A needle instead of a hammer. Can you modify the torpedoes? Remove most of the explosive payload and replace it with a focused plasma charge, something for piercing over exploding. Enslave their guidance to a hypervelocity launch. Kinetic energy does half the work." Sola and Ghent exchanged a look. The concept was sound, radical, but the physics held. "It could be done," Sola admitted. "It would mean rearming in the field, a dangerous proposition. The corvettes would be vulnerable." "They're warships," Kenna retorted. "Vulnerability is the job. The Gress left their supply chain unescorted because they believe you are too honorable to bypass their warships for a cowardly logistical strike. They are daring you to a fair fight. You need to prove you are uninterested. She held Sola's gaze. This is a back alley mugging, not a duel. You hit them where they're weakest, take their fuel, and disappear before they know what happened. She gestured to the corvettes on the display. Your fleet holds the main battle line. Make them think you're preparing for another honorable assault. Meanwhile, your corvettes take the long way around a wide, silent approach. Hit and run. One volley each, aimed at the Tinker's engine sections. Cripple them. The only sound on the bridge was the low hum of the ship. Kenna had outlined a strategy that was both brilliant and profoundly dishonorable. It was distilled human pragmatism. Sola stared at the board, then at Kenna. In her eyes was a deep, abiding weariness. Captain Ghent, Sola ordered, his voice ringing with resolve. Recall the corvette squadrons. I want engineering teams to begin modifying their torpedoes immediately. Implement the David maneuver. He gave Kenna a slight nod, an acknowledgement of the name's origin he must have found in the archive. A small boy, a giant, and a single well-placed stone. As Ghent stepped out orders, guards escorted Kenna Rain back to her cell. She had answered the question. She had explained the next chapter. As the cell door hissed shut, she wondered what price the Skriss would pay for reading from a book they should have left closed. The ship's arboretum was a sanctuary of cultivated greenery under a transparent dome that showed the star-dusted void. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming moon orchids. It was here that Sola came when the burden of command grew too heavy. He found Ghent waiting for him. Her posture was weary. Her usual military rigidity softened. The corvettes are away, she reported. The modifications were successful. They are proceeding on the attack vectors the human outlined. She paused. The crews are uncertain. They are trained for fleet actions. This type of solitary, stealth-based strike is foreign to them. War is adapting to the foreign, Sola said, running a hand over a broad fern leaf. We adapt or we die. Is that what we're doing? Ghent asked, her voice a whisper. Adapting? Are we becoming something else, something we swore to fight? She turned to face him. I have followed your orders, Terrian. I have stood by you as you employed deception, feigned cowardice, and now attacks on supply vessels. I search for the path we are on and find it unrecognizable. The use of his first designation was a plea. She was pleading with him as a friend. Sola looked out at the stars. Silene was a beautiful blue-white crescent. My family's in the capital city, Tyra, he confessed, his voice strained. My mate, Evelys. My two spawns, Saurus and Darien. They believe I am up here fighting with the honor of our ancestors. He met her gaze, and she saw the raw agony he had been hiding. The Gress are preparing to boil the oceans. The doctrine cannot save Evelys while she puts our children to bed. The honor of my ancestors cannot deflect a single drop of plasma from my home. He stepped closer, his voice a fierce, ragged whisper. I will sacrifice doctrine. I will sacrifice tradition. I will burn every saga ever written if it means they live to see another sunrise. If that makes me a stranger to you, so be it. That man would have led his family to an honorable death. I will be the monster that lets them live. The confession hung in the air. Ghent finally understood. This was more than a new philosophy of war. It was about a fierce, desperate love that had become a weapon. Her loyalty, which had been fracturing, suddenly solidified, reforged into something new. It was loyalty to Terrian Sola, the man sacrificing his soul for his family. The capital city will stand, she said, her voice firm, formality returning, but now imbued with conviction. We will see it stands. I am with you, Terrian. To the end. Sola gave her a single grateful nod. The moment of vulnerability was over. They were now conspirators in the greatest heresy their culture had ever known. Survival at any cost. The hit-and-run attacks were effective. The corvettes slammed their needle-like torpedoes into the vulnerable underbellies of the Gress tankers. 3 tankers were crippled in the first wave, venting fuel and plasma. The Gress response was a cold, furious acceleration of their existing plan. On the bridge, new intelligence feeds painted a grim picture. The Gress ground forces were now working with a frenzied, inhuman energy. They were abandoning secondary systems, bypassing safety protocols, and pouring all resources into one objective. They're accelerating the ground assault, Ghent reported. They're cannibalizing parts from their own ground vehicles to speed up construction of the cannons. They're also launching a full-scale assault on the planetary shield generator. New icons appeared on the map of Silene. Swarms of Gress ground troops moving toward the massive installation. They've accepted the logistical damage, Sola mused. They're gambling. They believe they can bring the cannons online and break Silene before they run out of fuel. He looked at the timer in the display's corner. The 74 hours he had bought had just been slashed to less than 30. They have accepted our wager and raised the stakes. The humans' tactic had worked, but it had also provoked the enemy. The Gress had shifted their objective from a naval victory to ending this on the ground. Now, the war in space had become a race against time on the surface. The order, when Sola gave it, landed on the bridge with seismic force. Open a secure channel to the Silenian Planetary Militia Command. Classification level, Omega. I'm transmitting a new set of tactical directives. He keyed a command into his console. The data packet screamed toward the planet. For the next 18 hours, as engineers swarmed over the corvette torpedoes, the Silenian Militia Command worked to turn forbidden theory into brutal reality. Ghent watched the confirmation light blink, her expression a mixture of awe and horror. She knew what was in that packet. It was the darkest chapter from the human archive. A file labeled Irregular Combat Doctrine. Sola was transmitting guerrilla tactics to the militia. He was teaching them how to turn their peaceful world into a killing field. The directives were specific and brutal. Instructions for using commercial mining lasers as sniper lanes. Schematics for turning automated cargo loaders into armored battery rams. How to use seismic charges to collapse transportation tunnels on advancing enemy columns, turning infrastructure into mass graves. It was a complete manual for total, unrestrained ground warfare. He was telling the farmers, engineers, and civic protectors to become insurgents. He was giving them the tools to save their world, but also a poison that would remain. The doctrine governed all Skriss conflict. A soldier's duty was to protect civilians, to minimize collateral damage. Sola had just ordered them to burn the world, to save it. He had taken the humans' fire and thrown it down onto his own people. The summons was a surprise. Guards brought Kenna Rain from her cell to a small private briefing room. High Admiral Sola was there, alone. The holographic display showed a topographical map of Silene, overlaid with the red markers of the Gress advance. Your strategy was effective, Sola began. It crippled their logistics. In response, they have escalated their ground campaign. I have taken countermeasures. He gestured to the map, and small blue icons flared to life. Militia units engaging the Gress in fierce, chaotic firefights. An explosion bloomed on the map as a transportation tunnel collapsed. I have given them your history, Sola said, his voice heavy. I taught them how to fight like humans. Kenna watched the display. She saw a mining convoy repurposed as a mobile artillery platform, shelling a Gress position. It was brutally effective. You've given them claws, she acknowledged. Good. I am concerned about the consequences, Sola admitted. Handing a child a plasma rifle requires teaching them how to handle it, Major. And what do you think it means? Kenna asked. For us, combat is a duty performed according to the doctrine, Sola explained. After a battle, our soldiers participate in the honor saga. They recount their deeds, place them within our traditions. It is a ritual of cleansing, separating the warrior from the act of war. Kenna let out a dry, humorless laugh. Huh. Honor sagas. You think a ritual is going to help a civilian who just used a shape charge to liquefy a squad of enemies in a sewer tunnel? You think they can recount the deed and feel cleansed? She stepped closer to the hologram, her eyes hard. You have given them more than new tactics, Admiral. You have given them a new kind of trauma. The tactics you're using, guerrilla warfare, urban combat, they create survivors, not warriors. A warrior fights for glory. A survivor fights to see the next minute, and they will do anything to achieve that. She looked him directly in the eyes. The violence you've unleashed becomes a permanent stain. Your honor sagas will be useless. They will feel shame, guilt, and terror that will wake them screaming for the rest of their lives. You wanted the next chapter? This is it. The psychological cost. If you fail to plan for it, you'll save them from the grass only to lose them to the war inside their own minds. You need to start planning for a new kind of veteran, Admiral. One your culture has never had. Sola stood in stunned silence. He had been so confused on the strategic and ethical implications that he overlooked the psychological fallout. The human prisoner had become more than a tactical advisor. She had become his conscience. The shield generator was failing. The militia fought with a ferocity that stunned the Gress, but they were outnumbered. The red icons on the map converged on the generator. It had hours, perhaps minutes, left. The war of tactics was ending. All that remained was one final desperate gamble. On the bridge, Sola gave his final, most insane order. "Prepare the bulk freighter, Quiet Wanderer," he commanded. "Strip it of all secondary cargo. I want it filled with the 1st and 2nd Marine battalions. Every elite soldier we have." Gent stared at him.
Admiral, the Wanderer is a civilian vessel. It has minimal shields. It is defenseless.
Exactly, Sola said, a fierce light in his eyes. "Comms. Once the Marines are aboard, broadcast a system-wide surrender on behalf of that vessel. Identify it as a refugee ship fleeing with a Silenian Genesis archive." A murmur went through the bridge. The Genesis archive was the colony's most sacred possession, a complete record of its history, culture, and biology. It was the soul of Silene. "The Gress commander is a predator, but also a collector," Sola explained. "He wants to erase Silene, the chance to capture the entirety of our culture in one prize, to annihilate our memory itself. It's a bait too tempting to ignore." It was the ultimate Trojan Horse, a lie wrapped in the truth of their desperation, a ship full of soldiers disguised as a vessel carrying the memory of a world. It was the most human tactic of them all, a story weaponized. The Gress commander watched the transmission. The Skriss bulk freighter, old and ungainly, drifted in the void. The message was pathetic. A civilian captain begging for the lives of his crew and the preservation of his culture. The commander, a being of immense size encased in a biomechanical throne, considered it. His swarm was moments from victory. The planetary shield was about to collapse. The ship was in irrelevance. But the archive, to possess the complete cultural record of a defeated enemy, was the ultimate victory. It was consumption as assimilation of their essence. To hold their history, their art, and their being, and to know he could extinguish it with a command, that was a prize of immense value. His arrogance, fed by the Skriss's recent cowardice, swelled. It was the final pathetic plea of a broken people. A trophy, not a trick. "Send a tractor beam," the commander clicked. "Bring the vessel into the primary docking bay. I will take this prize myself." The Gress flagship, a behemoth of articulated armor, extended its energy tethers and drew the Quiet Wanderer into its core. The Gress commander allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The hunt was over. Kenna Rain stood on the Ironhold's bridge. She was an observer now, a consultant. Her focus was on a chronometer and a tactical feed showing the Gress flagship. "They've taken the bait," Gent breathed, her voice tight. "The Wanderer is entering the docking bay." "Our moment comes after theirs," Kenna said. "Delay the assault."
"The Marines are in position," Gent insisted.
"No," Kenna countered. "You're thinking like a Skriss. Victory breeds overconfidence. The Gress commander has the prize in his hands. He's savoring it. His command structure will relax. There's a lag, a psychological window that opens between the moment victory feels certain and the moment they formally declare it." She tapped the screen. "I've studied this pattern across 100 human conflict. Post-victory command latency. It averages between 90 and 120 seconds. During that window, command response time to an unexpected internal threat increases by almost 40%. That is when your Marines strike." She was weaponizing psychology, calculating the exact moment of an alien species' arrogance based on human historical failures. The bay doors on the Gress flagship closed, the tractor beam disengaged. "Now," Sola ordered, his voice a tense whisper. Kenna nodded. "Now." On board the Quiet Wanderer, the Skriss Marine commander gave a single silent hand signal. Charges placed along the freighter's hull detonated outward, shattering the ship and turning its frame into shrapnel. Through the smoke and fire, 200 elite Skriss Marines stormed out, their battle armor reflecting the internal lights, their plasma rifles already firing. A contagion delivered directly to the heart of the enemy. The moment the charges detonated, the Gress flagship's command deck erupted. Alarms blared, internal sensors screamed reports of an invasion force. The Gress commander, moments from claiming his trophy, was now fighting a war inside his own ship. As he forced his attention inward, Sola executed his final gambit. "All ships," he roared. "Execute final pincer. Full power to engines and weapons. Strike the forces at the shield generator. Forget symmetry. Break them." The Skriss fleet surged forward. They moved like a starving pack, a wave of desperate, vengeful fury. They fell upon the Gress forces attacking the shield generator, striking them from their unprotected flanks while their command structure was in disarray. The Gress, leaderless and confused, receiving panicked orders from their besieged flagship, broke. The coordinated swarm disintegrated into disorganized pockets of resistance. For the first time, the red icons on the holographic battle space scattered, fleeing. The battle became a rout. The Gress ships, low on fuel from the earlier strikes and deprived of leadership, fled the system. The swarm broke. The siege was over. On the Ironhold's bridge, a stunned silence fell. They stared at the display, at the retreating red icons and the saved blue jewel of Silene. They had won. It was an ugly, brutal, dishonorable victory, built on a mountain of broken rules and forbidden knowledge. And it was their greatest victory. Weeks later, High Admiral Terrian Sola stood alone in the holographic chamber. Before him shimmered the assembled members of the Galactic Concord.
"High Admiral Sola,"
intoned a sonorous, multivocal entity.
"You have successfully defended the Silenian system. However, in doing so, you have violated Concord Armistice Treaty 38 Gamma, utilizing tactics classified as Prohibited Doctrine H1, and deemed a threat to galactic stability and the established codes of honorable conflict."
The verdict was cold and final.
As Concord formally censures you. We will strike your actions from the official record. We hereby bar you from sector-level command for a period of 10 standard years. The Silenian matter is closed.
The official session ended, leaving Sola alone. He had saved his world and received punishment for it. Then a single private channel opened. A new figure appeared, humanoid, her features in deep shadow, marked only by a small sigil of Concord internal security.
"Admiral Sola,"
she said, her voice a quiet Terran standard.
"That was the official record. This is something else."
She paused.
"We have reviewed the complete logs from your flagship's black box. Your maneuvers were unorthodox, but undeniably effective. The Gress are a plague, and plagues respond to tactics, not honorable challenges.
The shadowed figure leaned forward.
The Concord officially condemns your methods. Unofficially, she trailed off. There are factions who believe our doctrines of honorable conflict are a luxury we may soon be unable to afford. New threats are emerging. She delivered a simple request. Transmit the complete unedited archive of your unconventional maneuvers to this channel. Include the source material, all of it. This conversation never happened.
The channel closed. Sola stood alone, the Concord's hypocrisy a tangible presence. Publicly condemning him, they secretly demanded his dirty effective knowledge for themselves. They had banned human war tactics, and now they were copying them. The Ironhold's bridge was quiet, orbiting high above a healing Silene. The scars on the planet were visible, but they were scars of survival. High Admiral Sola, a censured, grounded commander, stood at his post, gazing at the stars. A sense of peace settled over him. Captain Ghent approached him, her steps light.
"Admiral,"
she said, a new warmth in her voice.
"The first ships from the Concord relief fleet have arrived."
Sola turned. "Good. Our crews deserve the rest."
"There is something you should see,"
Ghent said, a slight smile in her voice. She brought up a schematic on the main display. It was a new frigate design.
"This is the new Concordance-class patrol frigate. The first of the line just dropped out of hyperspace."
Sola studied the design. He noted the weapon hardpoints, the engine configurations. He focused on the torpedo bays. They were smaller than standard, designed for a faster, lower-yield projectile. The engine array was overspecified, built for speed and rapid acceleration, for raiding instead of holding a battle line. The ship's configuration was an exact match for the corvettes he had modified for the David maneuver. Ghent watched him, her knowing expression confirming what he knew. His censure was a lie. His disgrace was a cover story. They were integrating his forbidden tactics, born of desperation in human history, into the new doctrine. They were building them into Concord's next generation of warship hulls. Sola looked out at the stars, at the saved world where his family was safe. He thought of the cynical human historian who had shown him the path and the price that came with it. He had sacrificed his honor to save his people, and in doing so, had inadvertently handed the galaxy a weapon it desperately needed, but was unprepared for. A small, weary smile touched his lips. He had lost his honor, but he had won the war, and perhaps he had started a new one.